to kind of give an initial high-level overview of what it means to sell to the corporates, what are the mechanisms, and then we'll jump into an interactive mode.
Okay.
The way we've done it this way, and we found it very interesting. Um, so we'll follow that model, and if we need to change, we need to pivot, we'll pivot. But I'll hand it over to you now.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sanjay. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
And I'm glad that's the model that we're going with, because that's kind of what I guessed. So first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for joining this evening and spending some time with me. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from all of you as well. Congratulations on the success of your startups so far. I've been hearing many wonderful things about them from Mike, and I know there's been a resounding response within Boeing to the program and the efforts that you all have ongoing. So let's see. What I was thinking is I would give you a quick background on myself, and then maybe if it's possible, maybe at least one person from each team could do an intro. That way I can make sure that I tailor things to your needs. And then I have a couple kind of general guidance things, like points that I was going to run through. Please feel free to speak up at any time. If you have questions, don't feel like you need to hold them till the end or anything. And then maybe we can open it up, as Sanjay said, to kind of a general discussion, because I want to make sure that you get everything that you want to know out of our talk. So and just a little background on myself. My name is Mimi Basic. I've been with the Boeing company for about 11 years now. 8.5 of the years that I spent with the company was as a procurement agent, so as part of the buying function. So I was the direct interface for companies like yourself to work with, for Boeing. It was primarily on the government procurement side, working Boeing defense programs. But I think I've tried to kind of generalize the content I brought today for commercial as well, as government can also be a really tough area to break into, but I think a lot of the same rules apply. I spent some time buying sheet metal and machine parts when I first started here, then went to buy complex systems on development programs, then moved over to Boeing Phantom Works, buying pretty much anything for different proprietary programs. And then lastly, I was the lead negotiator with Northrop Grumman for our EA-18G Growler kits and the Next Gen Jammer development program. And then finally, I moved over here to what is now Boeing Horizon X as a project manager, and I now lead our New Business Horizons team, which is focused on what we call non-traditional partnerships. So partnerships with essentially things like tech companies and startups, anything that kind of doesn't look and feel like, a Department of Defense or airline, so kind of different partnership structures that maybe are traditionally outside Boeing's norm. So that's a little bit about me, but I would love to hear, a little bit about your startup. So if we could maybe go down the list quickly, if you don't mind.
Right. Sure. Sure. Let's do that. So why don't we start with Just IoT first? Who is
Okay.
here from Just IoT? Arshia, are you there? Okay, we'll pass them.
Okay.
Let's the next is let's say Empro. Nandita, I see you here. Can you introduce Empro?
Hi, Margaret. Hi, Sanjay. So, as Empro, we are trying to address the maintenance area of the commercial airline industry, where we want to bring in newer technologies which can facilitate technicians to carry out day-to-day jobs, thereby increase their operational efficiency and make the aircraft available all the time. So in that way, we've kind of narrowed down to three key value propositions we're trying to do. One is from various customer interviews that we came across and studying all the available tools in the market, we found some gaps out here. So we are trying to introduce voice-based assistants um, such that the technicians can carry out their tasks in a better manner. And second one is, there was access to manuals and documents as an issue because most of it is printed out in hard copies are carried and maintained around. So we want to make the manuals available offline by digital manuals and a voice-based assistant to read those manuals. And the third one is we didn't find a place where the defects rectifications are recorded. And this record is done manually by someone. It's the dirty copies that are actually available. So that if a voice-based assistant can actually you could speak to a system where you record what is the defect that is carried out and what is the rectification that you've done for it. In that way, these will all be captured as a defect rectification database where it can be quickly referred when the similar problem occurs across the airline at different places.
Awesome.
So this is what we are trying to offer.
Very cool.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nandita. Hey, Hassan, can you speak a little about? Let's try to keep it very brief so that we can get the max of Mimi's time.
Okay,
Hassan,
I can actually take
you are
that
on
up.
mute.
Hi, Vaishali
Okay,
here from
Vaishali.
Mauritius. Yeah, hi, Sanjay. Thank you so much for joining us, Mimi. And so just a quick intro to what we are doing. So at Mauritius, our whole mission is to try and democratize access to augmented and virtual reality content creation. So what we've essentially developed with our software is WordPress or PowerPoint for virtual and augmented reality. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to, use it for training purposes in B2B scenarios where, the trainers, domain experts themselves with zero coding experience can use our software and create an augmented or virtual reality-based content, interactive content for, their employees who want to train on heavy machines and any kind of process, etc. So that's essentially what we are doing with Red.
Awesome. What's the name of your company?
Vaishali,
Yeah. Yes, Andrew. Sorry, the name of my company is Mauritius. ERXIUS.
Thank you.
so Vaishali, while you are at it, you have tried to sell to corporates, right? Why don't you very briefly, speak about that experience in a minute? Because that will also set a tone of, what we will discuss.
Sure. So maybe one of the biggest things we are facing. So we have been trying to do this, like Sanjay said, to enterprises in India. The problem we faced is before we sell what we do, we're having to evangelize the need for augmented and virtual reality in training.
That's all the education.
Where that kind of exactly, and that kind of takes away a lot in terms of why for. So everybody's kind of seeing it as a good to have, but not a need to have, and especially what is the risk averse nature of the kind of people we've tried to push this across to. We've seen success in companies which are global entities, and organizations, so to speak, is interested in taking this because the global counterpart is already doing it. So there we've seen traction. But other than that, it's been difficult because, we've tried to educate, and then we feel that the whole thing becomes too much around the technology, which honestly nobody cares about. And we're just trying to show the benefit of using that and how we're giving them access. Because currently, if you have to create any augmented or virtual reality content, and the use case is already proven how it's so much improved training, maintenance, etc., right? But you need a coder to be able to do it for you. You need that dependency, you need that money and time and all the fancy hardware setup. our software generates the need for all of that. Not only can it be used by a non-coder, but we're also compatible with this kind of hardware. So one of the
Okay.
things we've been playing
Vaishali,
around with is how, yeah.
Vaishali,
So I was
sorry
just
to
going to say
interrupt you. Yes.
I was just going to say that we're trying to now see if this would work selling to American organizations and how the conversation would change. But so far, Indian enterprises, and this has been our, traction.
Right. So that was one of the corporates, one of the companies which has tried to sell to corporates. The other is Huvi Air. I see Vikshut, CEO and founder of Huvi Air, is on the line. Vikshut, very quickly, who you are and
Sure,
what you have, what your experiences are.
sure. Hi, Mimi. This is Vikshut here from Who We Are Technologies. We are a drone data solutions company, and we essentially are focusing on providing solutions, for the construction industry. We are now developing a product that is looking to embed aerial imagery-based insights into the construction, management workflows. So our customers are essentially construction companies which are into real estate development and large infrastructure development. So yeah, those are the kinds of customers that we are trying to reach out to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Yogesh, can you speak about EOL?
Sure, Sanjay. Hi, Mini. So, this is Yogesh from the EOL team, basically the end of life aircraft management team. So,
Okay.
the idea is around as we are selling a lot of airplane, on the faster at the same rate, the airplane which are already there in the market, they are going to be their end of life. So, removing their part and putting certifying overhaul them and putting them back in the supply chain for the new parts is what the idea is around.
Mm-hmm.
There are small players who are doing it regionally, bringing them to a common platform to meet the right demand with the right supply using the technology. Disruptive technology is what the whole idea is around, because as we go forward, the more the airplanes go end of life, the demand of the certified overhaul parts going to increase like anything.
Mm-hmm.
So this is whole idea is around that.
Awesome.
And then, finally, drone aggregator team, who is here from there? Ajay, do you want to speak about it, or Chandra?
Uh, hello, Sanjay. I'm Chandra here.
Yeah,
Hello,
Chandra.
Mimi. I'm from Drone Aggregator team, and we are trying to create a product called Drone Service Aggregator, where we are trying to bring the service provider and the end consumer of the drone services on a single platform. So our platform will be basically a platform where the drone service provider can register their service and the end service provider can order the service from the same platform. So it's like the similar platform what Amazon is having for the retail consumer and what Uber is having for the normal passenger.
Mm-hmm.
So ours is also like a two-sided market. So on one side of the our business is basically the who provide the services. So they could be providing the services from agriculture industry, construction industry, mining, survey, and different kind of industry. And on the other side, we have the end consumer who is trying to get the work done through the drone, basically. So it could be either retail user like farmers, or it could be the enterprise user like the big company, mining or survey company who wants to get the work done. So what we are trying to basically do is help the end consumer in selecting the product and selecting the service provider and selecting right time, right product first time, basically. So this is what our motto is.
Awesome.
So
And
that was
options.
our.
I mean, I'm sure you provide them a lot of different options, with it being a platform.
Yes.
Right.
Awesome.
So that is the group, Mimi. That's
Perfect.
this is the set of companies.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. It just gives me some very useful context, and it's certainly evident as to why these were chosen, because I think you're solving really critical customer problems and tapping into some really cool ways to solve them. So I'll start kind of through a few points and try to relate them to your businesses, and then please jump in with questions. So So the first thing that I thought about when I was preparing for this is, I guess probably the first piece of advice is build as many relationships as possible. The whole process oftentimes when you're working with corporates seems, very regimented and very standardized. And to be honest, I think it's really just the people behind it who are moving it. And there's different levels. There'll be a procurement agent or a person who may actually send you the RFP and award the contract. And there's a kind of an army behind them of program management, technical experts, essentially decision makers and influencers who are kind of feeding the information through the person who actually has the agency or the procurement agent. So, it's key to build relationships as much as you possibly can with those people. Oftentimes it's not done through the procurement agent, pre-RFP. So I would encourage you, especially the teams that are looking at construction and oil and gas and some of these other industries, or, with the AR/VR content or end-of-life aircraft, to go to as many conferences as you can and go to as many symposiums and, other sort of industry events as you can, and just get out there for those 12-hour conference days with a whole bunch of business cards and connections. And I think the key really is to follow up and, keep those connections going because those are how you get on bid lists. And, that's how you actually are considered is really just having the people connections. And I think genuinely people will really want to help, startups get off the ground if they think that you are credible and your business is solving a problem that, they know of. So I think the number one thing is kind of get out there in person, build relationships, do the outreach, and try to ask them as many questions as you possibly can about what their problem sets are. Nandita, when you were talking about MPro, you very clearly mentioned, the 3 points in the value proposition. And I think really understanding the value proposition of your company and understanding the customer problems that you're solving are certainly key. Because I think was it Hassan mentioned, they're facing a problem of educating the customers. And so I think getting out there and talking to them will give you an additional good idea of kind of where in the education spectrum they are. Actually kind of going out and talking to them, and do they think it's some cool, super techie thing, or do they think, oh yeah, we should all be using AR, VR. This is totally normal for us, and maybe some conferences could provide additional contacts. Conferences can be, a little expensive and things like that. But to be honest, as long as you're kind of picking some of the key ones, the return on investment can be pretty amazing. Then, obviously try to understand the customer's problems and know how your solution is differentiated in contrast to your competitors. So essentially trying to avoid, being a commoditized product. And then kind of past conferences, trying to, develop new business and things like that. I would recommend, kind of watching press releases for companies that, you want to become your customers. Do a lot of background research on who the players are, what they've done before, understand, what they've tried and what's failed, and what they've had success with, because you'll kind of understand that oftentimes big corporates have what we like to call a good amount of scar tissue. So, they'll, if something comes up around a certain, technology type or something like that, and they've tried that and it's failed before, the company may be less likely, people may be less likely to bring up a similar solution. So maybe that's, not one that's worth your time, whereas another company may be a, earlier adopter or not have that, previous bad experience with whatever the solution may be. If you're interested in government business, there are quite a few different websites where different governments will post solicitations. I think, the U.S. one is FBO. And so there will be kind of other different types of communications. One other way to get in is, although if you've got kind of the runway in your business, it may be a longer acquisition time, but oftentimes companies will put out requests for information rather than requests for proposal, and they're just trying to start generating a bid list of, who they might want to talk to. So, it may be helpful or, minimize the amount of time if you kind of have a prepared request for information sort of response that could cover different industries or different RFI kind of answers, because those will generally be somewhat general. They're not going to be too specific or detailed. So then you can kind of start kind of getting into the mind space of the buyers. And they're usually a pretty good way to, be able to make connections and get contact names and people to follow up with. As someone, let's see, I think as Hassan was mentioning, the problem of having to educate your customers is, I think, actually quite common when you're looking at technology solutions. So I think one of the things that I had actually noted here was try to be really strategic about how you choose your customers, because oftentimes corporates, especially with all of the businesses being B2B businesses, they're kind of slow. And so you'll want to make sure that your startup has enough funding and things like that to fund a reasonable time frame for those corporates, because, there might be multiple layers of approvals, different things that are written up. It'll be pending different budgets and things like that. And so kind of as a whole, corporates can be kind of hard to rely on until you've gotten, you've won an RFP and you've become there's a barrier to entry or something like that for your solution with that corporate. So it's probably really important to start understanding what your customer acquisition costs are. So, how long what's your sales cycle typically? How many new customers can you take on, a year, things like that. And then, are those the right customers for you to be choosing? Is it a geographic segmentation that, allows you to, have more face time with those customers because your particular product may require a lot of face time, or maybe it doesn't. But try to make sure that they kind of, whatever your strategy is, aligns with how you want to grow your business. Other things kind of pre-RFP. If there are particular companies that you're looking to sell to, do your research and figure out if there's some systems or forms or special you need to sign up for to actually get into their systems to be eligible to bid to them. A lot of big corporates, it's kind of like if you were going to apply for a job, you need to be in their system and submit your resume and things like that. So a lot of large companies have a kind of processing system like that. And so in order to be eligible or even view some of their solicitations, you may have to be in their system. So maybe do some research on things like that. The other thing that would be helpful to do is prepare information and reach out to your references in advance. If it's the first time that you're dealing with a large corporation, they're probably going to want to have some information on previous work you've done. And if this is your first contract for this company, maybe you can use references from other companies or other professional experience that you and your colleagues have had. But if you're new to that company, they're going to just corporates have kind of usually they're more risk averse and they don't want to take a lot of risk, and so this is a way to help them be more comfortable with dealing with a brand new startup company. Is that we've got some references, you can call these other companies, or I've worked with these other companies in a past life on another project that I did or something like that. So that might be helpful information, and you don't want to have to be scrambling around during a 2-week RFP response period, calling all your references to see if, they'll actually refer you and things like that. So that might be something to prepare ahead of time. I'll pause here. Does anybody have any questions?
Anyone on the call? Any questions? Because if they don't, I have 1 or 2 points that I want to bring up.
Oh, yeah, let's do that, and then we'll go on to RFPs.
Okay, Hassan.
Sure.
Yeah, who? Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. There will probably be a lot of eligibility criteria for a lot of corporate solicitations anywhere that you're kind of working on them. So references will be helpful. Sometimes it's past experience and things like that. And so to be honest, I mean, one strategy is to partner with other companies that, may have some of the value for, to hit some of the eligibility criteria. Be careful when you're partnering, and, ensure that, you're maintaining the value of what you're offering is and getting a commensurate stake in whatever the outcome is. But yeah, I think, what sort of eligibility criteria are you seeing? Yeah. Mhm. Oh yeah, that's really difficult. It's kind of the chicken and the egg problem there. So, are there maybe any other options from a customer acquisition prospect, to sell, to different entities or anything like that that may not have as many eligibility requirements? Okay. Yeah. I think it will definitely be so in government procurement in the U.S. Oftentimes they'll have eligibility requirements, but they also in the U.S. will have small business exemptions. So small businesses will not have to meet as many of the eligibility criteria as large businesses. Because they want to encourage small business participation, which is probably similar to what you're seeing. I think when it gets to the commercial markets and things like that, in the U.S., it's generally more subjective. So there will be ability to waive some of the eligibility criteria. And to be honest, if it's a company that you're really, really interested in doing business with, and maybe you don't meet all of the eligibility criteria, but you think that it's the perfect company for the value proposition, I would encourage you to, submit a response anyway, because maybe the corporate could look at it as a potential kind of risk mitigation plan where, they might do a, double award. So they could say, hey, we're going to award this company that meets all of the eligibility criteria, but we also think, that your company has a lot of potential to solve this problem for us. We think it's a pretty novel solution, and it's lower cost because you're a startup or whatever, and so they may award 2 companies. So not always a zero-sum game. They sometimes it could be as a backup or a longer game thing. So if it's one you're really interested in, I wouldn't necessarily let the eligibility criteria deter you from submitting at least something. Sure. Any other questions? Points?
So, Mimi, this is Sanjay.
Yes.
In the past, I tried to sell in India, and I will second Hassan's experience. It has been really, really, really hard to do so. But that said, there are ways to get there. At least what and I want your opinion or your views on how does it work to sell direct as against selling through partners, or going with partners where it's an enterprise sale, and some partners like the consulting firms could be already engaged with a set of customers that you really, really want to go to, and you can then create a value proposition together and go with them. So that is one of the aspects which if you can it'll be useful for everyone in this group to know more about.
Sure. Yeah. So on partnering, there may be opportunities in some spaces that are worthwhile to partner, to meet eligibility requirements or potentially open doors or provide some kind of channel access. Kind of what the group that I lead now, we specialize in doing partnerships. What I would encourage you to do if you're ever looking to enter into a partnership with another company is, one, just make a really simple list of what they're bringing to the table and what you're bringing to the table, and kind of understand which things are differentiated and which things are not, so that kind of if you're the smaller fish, if the value that you're bringing could be commoditized when matched up with the partner's value, kind of it's less of a sticky partnership. And then make sure that the value that you're gaining from the partnership is commensurate with what you're putting in. So make sure that the leverage is kind of even and balanced. And then, from a partnering perspective, I would encourage you to make sure that you have a written document. I see a lot of times companies kind of jump into these very informal partnerships, but I think it's important to have documented what the partnership is for. Is it for a specific RFP? Is it for a specific market? Are there any exclusivity, provisions or anything like that? Because different people can sit in the same conversation and come out with completely different understanding of whatever the opportunity space is. And so if it's a big enough opportunity and things like that, and it's a sophisticated other partner, I would encourage you to get some kind of help or guidance. Maybe it's an attorney or something like that, to ensure that your startup is protected and you're getting the leverage that you need out of the partnership, and that everything's kind of clearly defined so that it doesn't tie you up or keep you out of future engagements or something like that. So one, just really understand the value of what you're bringing and what they're bringing. And then two, write it down. It could be a simple one-page memorandum of understanding document or something like that. And I honestly, if the other party is hesitant to enter into a one-page document that just defines the terms of how we're going to go after this, I would be a little worried. So, it should be very clear and make sure everyone has the same understanding.
Exactly. Yeah, don't even get into it if it is if they're not signing up on that paper. Correct. Because,
Yeah. And it's
it
okay to
is.
ask, but I'm sure it's hard and it's scary, being a startup, but just getting that clarification can be really important.
Correct.
And it could help you from a startup perspective because you have something to leverage, to raise more funds or something like that, So
Yeah.
it could work to your advantage. Any other questions? If not, we can kind of go into some RFP points.
Sure.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll keep going. So let's see. RFPs. It seems like it would be a really obvious point, but I'll make it anyway because I've seen it happen a whole lot of times. Answer the whole RFP. I can't tell you how many times we would get RFP responses and they were not complete. They hadn't answered all the questions. They submitted 20 pages on something that wasn't even asked about, but then they didn't answer the full solicitation and you have to disqualify the whole bid. So answer what they're asking. If you want to give some other background on your company, that's great too, but make sure that front and center, you're answering what the solicitation is asking for. And then also make sure you submit it on time. A lot of times we would get, at 1 hour before the RFP was due, people asking for a 2-week extension. And to be honest, that holds up the entire program because you have to give the 2-week extension to everyone. And then the program is not awarding things on time. And, it can delay things and it's just not looked well upon. So try to answer the RFP on time if you can. Sometimes they'll just disqualify anyone who's late. So don't count on them kind of holding anything for you. The other thing is oftentimes when you can submit questions during the RFP period when it's open, you may think you have like the world's smartest question that's just going to give you all the answers. Be really careful because oftentimes any questions that you submit, all of the questions and the answers will be submitted to all of the bidders. So your competition will see what questions you're asking, and they will also have access to the answers to those questions. So be somewhat strategic about what you're asking. Sometimes you'll have to just make assumptions if you don't want to give the same advantage to your competition. The other thing is always submit a compliant response. It seems like it would be really obvious, so I know the Section C is really obvious, but if you submit a response that doesn't comply with the RFP, like maybe you have a really great idea on how to solve this problem, but it's not compliant to the RFP, submit a compliant response and then submit an additional alternate proposal with your really great idea because they'll need to compare apples to apples usually. So if you submit an orange, then they will not know what to do with it. So submit apples to apples, but then, if you have this, additional great idea, go ahead and submit it as an alternate proposal. But you'll need to make sure that you're being considered, which is why you need to submit the compliant proposal as well. But alternate proposals are really helpful because it may be something that they haven't ever thought of. And it may give them some ideas or, they could dual source and submit to win, or maybe for the next time around, it will help shape whatever requirements they're writing in their next RFP that, they may have you in mind for. So don't assume that they've already thought of that. Alternate responses, I've seen plenty of them get awarded where maybe they just, the buyer or the team just didn't know that existed, and they may also think it's a really great idea. And then if you are awarded the contract, I think the first thing that you may want to do is get a teleconference together and ask them what you can expect from here on out. How long will it take for them to place the contract? Is there any additional information that they need? Are there any systems you need to be set up on? Is there any access that you need granted? Are there any IT requirements that need to be met? So, what do you need to be doing? It's kind of like, it's really exciting, you won, and now what? So, what does the timeline look like? Who are all the people that you should work with? Because the team that you'd be working with post RFP is different than the team that you'll work with during the RFP sometimes. So there may be some change in who you're interfacing with. So that's a great scenario if that happens. But if you are not awarded the contract, reach out and ask them for feedback or a debrief. So oftentimes corporates will hold debriefs with all of the companies that were not awarded a contract, and you can get a lot of really valuable information out of that for whatever your next solicitation or competition is that you participate in. They might not tell you, everything because maybe they won't tell you any specific information probably, but they'll give you some general areas to work on, and they'll probably give you some pretty valuable feedback. And they'll also, if you submitted an alternate proposal, they'll probably give you some feedback on the alternate proposal that you submitted, and you can kind of understand, if it answered or if it didn't. So I think that kind of is most of the main points, but we've got about 15, 20 minutes left, so I can open it up to questions, and if there's particular things you're wondering about. It's really hard to do. B2B is really hard, especially with large businesses. So this is a monumental feat.
Yeah, selling to them is hard. Hey, Vikshut, you guys are...
Margaret,
Sorry.
Nandita here. I have a question. This is more in terms of we are internal to Boeing, right? In our case, how do we go about? Do we go about partnering with some airlines who be a potential customer and build the product? After this acceleration phase, at the max, we will have some prototypes or mock-ups. The product as such wouldn't be there. So do we go partner with them or possibly co-create with them? Or do we go internally? Let's say BGS is the business that we need to go to sell our idea. Do we go that way, or do we partner with? How do we actually go?
Or do you partner with who? I'm sorry, the phone cut out.
Do we partner with the airlines, the customers?
Well, you honestly could probably go either way. It depends on what your ultimate strategy is. And kind of how your solution is tailored. One potential thing to do is, as part of Horizon X, we like to do kind of small, we kind of call them experiments. And you could, do an experiment partnering with a small, airline on a, short-term basis. And then you could, also work the BGS angle. I would be careful to determine which one's going to take the longest. Startups oftentimes kind of need to start showing sales in order to get more sales, as someone had mentioned. So, time is probably, so whichever one you can maybe hit first would be key. Or if there are, other small, kind of startups that you could work with and prototype and do smaller projects with. I guess I don't know the right answer, but maybe doing some kind of test and learn in each area will give you some valuable data points to inform, what's the right way to go. But I wouldn't think of them as exclusive to each other. You could perhaps do both.
Sure. Thanks, Margaret. Sure.
Yeah, let me know how it goes.
Anyone else?
One of the, I'll kind of give you, so there's to the point on that one, it's a completely different industry. But I would encourage you to look up, there's a Harvard Business School case study on the business Rent the Runway, and it's totally different, outside of aerospace here. But in the Rent the Runway case study that they did, the founders of Rent the Runway did some really targeted experimental kind of projects to test the value, like what their customers valued, and how they should sell to them, and what the experience was like, and things like that. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that case study. And kind of, I think there's an audio version as well that I don't know if you're an audiobook person, I am. And take a look at that, and then it'll start to get you thinking in ways that you can start experimenting with different customer sets while still generating revenue on it. So, they did these experiments, but they were revenue generating experiments, so it wasn't all based on cost. So that might be something. It's a really fun case study to listen to, and it may give you some ideas on ways to generate revenue while you're trying to define, what the customers value.
That's a great insight, Margaret. In fact, even we were thinking of something like a targeted experiment.
Mm-hmm.
That will let us know whether this works or doesn't work, on how do we go about changing it. That's a great insight. I will definitely read about Rent.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Sure.
I find that there's a ton of value to be gained by running these types of experiments with customers, and it's really hard to do with B2B. But there's just certain things you get from experience.
Understand. We were trying to, if we could leverage, already Boeing has a partnership with many of the airlines. If we could leverage for one of them, that's where that's our thinking. So if we could partner with them and run some target experiments.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
Thanks.
Hi, Margaret. This is Vikshut here from Who We Are Technologies. My question is very specific to a customer that we have approached, a potential customer. They are a large infrastructure developer in India,
Mm-hmm.
and they're at a stage where they really have understood the value of drone technology. And how it is going to help them with their construction management workflows, and they're at a stage where they want more information on how that can be enabled, right? So they aren't yet at an RFP stage; they are more of like an RFI stage, I suppose.
Okay.
And we are just trying to put together a proposal, and we are looking like at an end-to-end kind of a approach, where we actually are looking at a consultative approach, where we actually understand what their existing operations look like, from various perspectives, and look at where actually drone data solutions can help them throughout their workflows, and how we can integrate that, what kind of infrastructure they need to have in place, and how it all gets operationalized. So just at this stage, what kind of a proposal would you expect? What kind of information would you like? Would a corporate like at this stage, and how much do we reveal? How much do we hold back? Just wanted to kind of get your perspective on that.
Yeah. So on the reveal and hold back aspect, what I think startups need to be careful about is you can tell them what you are going to do, but I would not tell them how you are going to do it. So you can tell them, we are going to save you this many dollars. We are going, here's how we're going to do our operations and things like that. But on the, what not to reveal is if there are key differentiators to your business, like if it's part of your business model, your technology solution or something like that, or it's intellectual property or something, make sure that you keep that protected. Because I'm sure you're dealing with large companies, that they can go to other companies or, things like that, or oftentimes, companies will develop in-house solutions and things like that. So I always say, you can tell them the what, but not the how. So that's a totally okay thing to do. At this stage in the game, it's probably all about requirements shaping. So, trying to, I think you're doing exactly the right thing, understanding how they currently do it, because you can start quantifying what the time and cost savings would be to their company. It would, do as much competitive research as you possibly can, maintain contacts with those entities. FaceTime is really helpful. So, if there are opportunities to meet with them in person, or say, hey, we have a new solution. Would you mind giving us some feedback on it? And going over to meet with them and show them some new thing that you've come up with. It'll kind of keep the dialogue going, and you'll be able to do even more discovery about what their problems are that they're trying to solve. You can always submit an unsolicited, like RFI or proposal. So, if you've got a solution and, that maybe, they're taking quite a while or something like that, it never hurts. You could, you could send over, a couple page, unsolicited proposal, to them saying, hey, we've got this solution. I think it could help you in these ways, or we've noticed these are your problems. I know you haven't put an RFP out yet, but we thought we would just send this over for your review. So that's a totally okay thing to do, and it might be really helpful to them as they're trying to define what sort of solutions they want to go after.
Got it, Margaret. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Margaret. This is Arjun here. I have a follow-up question. I'm from Vikshit's company itself. What I want to know is that how do the big corporates view startups like us when they want to partner or deal with us? That is, the kind of solution that we are providing now is something that will that will kind of change their established processes and all. And since we are a small startup, we have not really worked with big scale corporates. How exactly do we maneuver that part, wherein we come across as people who have very good hold over the processes that take place in large corporates?
Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest, as the way of corporates think of startups, to be honest, each one is unique. I think the tide is turning, though, where they're much more welcoming and inclined, corporates and governments, to work with startups, because people are starting to see the value proposition that startups bring, being, more agile and quicker and things like that. But I don't know if there's really one way. One of the key things to look out for corporates that are kind of startup friendly is ones that have venture funds, because it means that they're actually willing to put funding into startups that they think are key to their value proposition. So, look out for things like that. I would, if there are, this is kind of back to doing some research. If there are large companies that you're interested in working with and they've worked with other startups before, I would look up those startups' information and give them a call, because, I think there's a lot to be gained from learning from others' experiences. So, and startups are pretty friendly with other startups. So, pick up the phone, find the people, call them, ask how their experience has been, and see if, this is a corporate that is really great for startups to work with, and they've helped them along and see it as complementary, or if it's a corporate that, took a really long time and, maybe didn't take it as seriously as a startup would. So it never hurts to just reach out and ask for some data points from people who have been there with that particular company. But they all operate completely differently. The only entities that probably have somewhat of standardization are governments.
Hi, Vaishali here from Mauritius. So my question was around, so you said, right, that it takes a lot of time with corporates in general to get the deal through. But with your experience, are there any early signs or red flags that we can pick up which kind of tell us that this is not going to go through and they're just dragging it along? Because one of the things we've seen here is people don't directly want to say no. So, if there's something that we can pick up early on.
That's a tough one. That is a really good question, though. I think you should be able to gauge some kind of sense of urgency or need for whatever solution you're providing. It would be helpful to understand what the priorities are of the organization that you're working on. They should have some pretty well-defined, like these are our big rocks that we're going after, or priorities, and understand how what you're doing aligns to their priorities. Because I think when you get into corporates, it's all about it's people's careers and leaders wanting to make an impact and things like that. And if your solution aligns with those people's like personal objectives and impact that they want to make, it's much more likely to succeed, rather than it being kind of a nice to have but not a need to have. So understanding the alignment of your value proposition with the objectives of the organization is key. Is it on the kind of what you would consider the need to have, must do list? Or, is it somewhat secondary? Other indicators, I mean, I don't really know. I think sometimes people are hesitant to say no. I would try to, understand, like, are they making moves in other spaces? So, what is their typical timeline to say yes and actually go do something, as compared to kind of what you're experiencing? Because, they may not be telling you yes or no. And I think it's okay to ask and say, hey, we're a startup. We only have so many resources. Could you please give me a read on if I should continue to expend resources on this opportunity, or has it already been decided? And I think that's a totally okay thing to ask, essentially, for a straight answer, because, you only have so many people and so much money.
Hey, Mimi, this is Sanjay. I have a formula, and it's not my formula. It is something that came out of SAP, because they do such a huge, continuous enterprise sale. It is called BANT, B-A-N-T. B stands for budget, A for approval hierarchy, N for need, and T for timeline. So when you reach out to corporates and you assess, through these conversations, these are the four things. BANT, if all those are completely ticked off positively, then you have a chance. Otherwise, you don't. Even one
That's
missing,
a really good framework.
Out of there.
I like that. BANT. I have to use that.
Right. So this is something, SAP kind of drills completely into the minds of their sales folks, and it very effectively.
I like that one. It's a good one.
So any of these, budget, approval hierarchy, need, and timeline. Need is not nice to have. They should be really going after. They should really need it. So, and T for timeline, if they have something that has a 6-month timeline, then you're not. There's no point. Go there again in 6 months.
Right.
Then focus on some other customer. So
Yeah.
if these four are in place, then we are in good shape. That's a formula that I
That's a really
apply.
good one.
Actually.
Any other questions?
Good. So we are also out of time.
Okay. Well,
But-
thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. I think your businesses are awesome, and I'm so glad that you're all part of the program. My email address is on the meeting notice, and I'm usually pretty quick on emails. So if there's some other question that you didn't get to or that you think of later, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help, and would definitely love the opportunity to.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Appreciated.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
All right. Have a great day or evening, I guess. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mimi.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.